We're going to start this evening talking all things America. To begin with, President Trump announces tariffs. Yes, steel and steel products from all over the world will go up in the next few weeks to 50%. There is but one exception, and that's the United Kingdom. And those tariffs will stay at 25%, or maybe even less if we carry on with our trade negotiations. The funny thing about that was, in the House of Commons today, we had Keir Starmer saying what a great position we were in, without ever mentioning the fact that without Brexit we couldn't be there. And somehow the Conservatives appeared to be attacking the position. It all seemed very, very odd. But we also had Karen Leavitt, the press spokesman of the White House, yesterday saying this about the BBC.
We don't take the word of Hamas with total truth. We like to look into it when they speak, unlike the BBC, who had multiple headlines. They wrote, Israeli tank kills 26, Israeli tank kills 21, Israeli gunfire kills 31, Red Cross says 21 people were killed in an aid incident, and then, oh wait, they had to correct and take down their entire story, saying we reviewed the footage and couldn't find any evidence of anything. Oh. Okay, so we're going to look into reports before we confirm them from this podium or before we take action, and I suggest that journalists who actually care about truth do the same.
And we also had Elon Musk. Now, I have some experience of this. Musk can love you, but often not for very long and turn against you. And then we saw this last night. I'm sorry, I just can't stand it anymore. This massive, outrageous, pork-filled congressional spending bill is a disgusting abomination. Shame on those of you who voted for it. You know you did wrong. You know it. Well, joining me down the line to discuss all of this is a very good friend of mine, Jason Miller, Donald Trump's former communications strategist. And Jason, there's a lot of stuff to unpack here. I mean, there really is. It's quite difficult to follow what Trump's doing on tariffs, to be honest. But, it does genuinely seem that the United Kingdom, because of Brexit, is in a relatively privileged position.
Yeah, Nigel, you're exactly right. And I think the fact that the UK came to the table and President Trump recognized that, was able to put together a trade deal very quickly. And now, actually, I think both countries will be in a much better position. And it's something that really goes to where we can strengthen the bond between the two countries. And I tell you, Nigel, the way that the EU has approached this has been completely wrong. They've done it completely backwards. And I think so much of that is because it's these bureaucrats, the technocrats who are in Brussels, as you would know, if anyone who I could talk to on this entire planet knows about the bureaucrats and technocrats in the EU and Brussels, it'd be you. I think they're trying to dig in and really trying to cause a fight, and I think that's going to ultimately not work out very well for the EU.
And is there a chance that over the course of the next few weeks that the UK and America can negotiate something better than where we are?
Well, I do think as you start to put the fine print on all these things, obviously both sides are probably going to have a couple of little tweaks and changes. So I could see this becoming an even better deal, so to speak, for both sides. But I wouldn't want to get ahead of U.S. Trade Rep Ambassador Jameson Greer on that, or Scott Bessent, the Secretary of the Treasury.
Sure. Understood. Now, the BBC, Donald Trump in the past has been critical of the BBC. And it was interesting to see his press spokesman yesterday having a real go. I have to say, I think Trump's got a fair point here about the BBC, hasn't he?
Well, he really does. And I think just from my perspective, when you look at the BBC, I think it probably stands for the BS Broadcasting Corporation. I'm not sure what the actual letters are supposed to be. But hopefully Ofcom doesn't come and smack me down for even saying that. But look, when you go out there and deliver news that is so biased, and when it's not even news, when so much of it is made up or it's fake, then I think that's really bad out there for people who are legitimate journalists, for people who do want to present the truth, who want to report on what's going on. But you can't be a reporter and be a political commentator at the exact same time. It's one or the other. Either you're trying to deliver the news or you're trying to make news and shape it. And I don't think you can do both.
There have been one or two BBC backtracks in recent times on things that have been said. Although, to be fair to the BBC, sometimes it's tough to know exactly what the truth is in a place like Gaza. Now, Elon Musk, we've got to talk Elon Musk while you're with us, Jason. I mean, look, he came into the campaign. There's no doubt in my mind he did a huge amount of work in helping to get Trump elected, a huge amount of work in frankly, making the Trump campaign look cool, reaching out to young people. But as I found myself, after a sort of fairly brief friendship, he seems to turn on people. And this last night was a pretty vicious attack on the president, wasn't it?
Yeah, and I'm not happy about it at all. Obviously, I'm a loyal supporter of President Trump's, and while I'm very appreciative for everything that Elon Musk has done up until this point, here's what people in the UK need to realize is right now this bill, this big, beautiful bill, this reconciliation budget package, which is a whole bunch of jargon that nobody in the UK should fully have committed to memory, this is still going through the Senate, the upper chamber for us, where the details are being finalized. And if Elon wanted to go in there and say, I want to try to get my EV tax credit reinserted or some other provision, then he still has that ability to do so. But you can't be a part of the team and then turn and start attacking the president in such a direct personal matter, and still then expect for everybody to say that you're their friend. And so I think this was the complete wrong way for Elon to go about doing it. Because what he's made it very personal. And this should not be something where you're going directly after President Trump on. I mean, in our Constitution, it is the Congress that writes these bills. If the president and rest vote, the budget director could write it and say, we're just going to sign it into law, then they would. But that's not how it works here. But again, I think Elon shouldn't be attacking the president this directly, and I think that'll probably impact their friendship.
So do I. Jason Miller, absolute pleasure to have you on the programme. Thank you very much indeed. Jason Miller, their former senior advisor to President Trump and a great friend of mine and this channel. I'm joined by Kwasi Kwarteng, former Conservative MP and Chancellor, and Lloyd Russell Moyle, former Labour MP. So there he is, Lloyd, the Prime Minister. The UK's in a better position than anybody else in the rest of the world. There is an irony in a Prime Minister who wanted to overturn Brexit benefiting from it.
Well, he thought at the time that we would have been better in the EU, and if we'd been in the EU, maybe he would have persuaded the EU to take a different kind of tack.
Oh, come on.
Please. But now we are out.
Yeah.
You have to make the best of the benefits that you get. We've lost some things out of being out, but you do get some other corollary benefits. And I think here has done a pretty good job here, because it's not about overall tariff numbers, actually. That's pretty irrelevant. It's about the differential. It's about the differential between the tariffs in other countries relative to what you've got. Yeah. And if we've got the lowest relative to the rest of the world, and that might go down, what you will see is American companies saying, well, actually, UK is in a perfect position because you've got to deal with Europe for trade. You've got to deal with other countries, Japan and everything else for trade. But you also have these low trade tariffs that we can... And companies don't automatically hate tariffs. What they want is certainty. And if the tariff is moderate and fair, and if it's certain that it's not going to suddenly go up and down because we've got a good deal,
it's good for business
will want to relocate it. So actually, I think Labour's really done very well on this, and this might be one of the saving graces for Labour if it starts to play out in jobs.
Well, I think that Starmer is doing far better on the world stage than he is domestically.
Definitely. But actually, what he could have done, Nigel, is say, as a Remainer, I have to accept that Brexit.
He can't
do it. But they can't do it.
No.
He cannot bring himself. No. And even, Remainer friends of mine, they can't bring themselves to say what is obvious to a 10-year-old, a 12-year-old, whatever, that the fact that we're out of the EU means that we can negotiate our own deal.
Because the fight around Brexit was not really about the economy. It was about democracy and identity.
Well, it was part of it. The
main motivation for most Remainers was really an identity thing, and for most Leavers because they wanted to take back control. And I think that's fair.
Lloyd, forget about the theology and the history. Look at the present, OK? And all he had to say was, Brexit has enabled us to do X, Y and Z, which we couldn't do before.
He doesn't have to say it at all.
No, he could say it.
I just thought sitting there it was pretty ironic. Very keen to know, folks, what you think at home. Is the UK now in a good, strong position? Farage at gbnews.com. Let me know your views. Now, moving on to the BBC. I was trying to be fair in some ways to the BBC, that knowing what's true and what's not in Gaza, where there is no proper reporting, and obviously Hamas do put their side of the story. But there's been a growing feeling that the BBC are prepared to believe the worst of Israel.
Well, that's because the Israeli government have been shown repeatedly to make up stories and lies almost in equal measure to Hamas. And I think you're quite right that at the moment both sides are complete propagandists and they say their lies, and it is difficult to get through to the truth. But I think overall the BBC has told a relatively balanced story. If you ask people like Gary Lineker, they'll say that the BBC went too far supporting Israel and not criticising what's happening enough. So I do think it gets attacked from both sides.
Yeah, that I get.
And in reality, the BBC has been pretty fair in showing that this atrocity is happening, that Israel is now committing almost certain genocide, and it's
genocide,
sickening, despite the awful thing that happened
genocide,
to
Lloyd,
Israel.
I don't think that's the right word.
Well, that is the word that's legally being used now.
The Prime Minister will not accept the word genocide.
But the International Criminal Court...
who cares what they think?
Well, they're the international courts. But let's just say war crimes then, because to some extent the punishment for both is equal.
You've been very clever.
Quasi, hang on. October the 7th was a war crime.
It was.
And that there's no doubt.
That's right. And he's been very clever at not addressing the actual situation, the actual question. What Catherine Levitt, I can't remember her first name, but she's a very good press spokesman for Donald Trump, and she questioned BBC bias. And if the question is there bias in the BBC?
Yeah.
I would say, of course there is. Yeah. Even Andrew Marr said, we are progressive, and we make no bones about that. And that's the things that should be addressed.
But towards Israel very often, not against it.
No, but, and I think in that particular instance where, and I've never heard anything like it, where you put a news story and then you have to take it down and say, well, actually, we haven't had this confirmed. The whole point about being a journalist is that you confirm the stories before you publish them.
Yeah, and
this is an embarrassment.
There is this example of a story that the BBC covered where they talked about a massacre that had happened. It actually turned out that, in fact, this was 4.5 kilometres away from where the BBC reported. Look, as I say, it's difficult in war zones. I think, Lloyd, I have to say, I think the point that Kwasi makes is that very often on issues, the BBC are biased without even knowing they're biased.
It's true.
The BBC's job...
They've got an inbuilt bias.
The BBC...
That's the issue.
I'll agree with you, but the bias is to represent the state and the status quo of mainstream British institutional opinion. Not centre-left, institutional opinion. Now, your view is the institutions of the state are centre-left.
Yeah, that's
my view is the institutions are centre-right. And my suggestion is it's probably means
depends where
both of us are on either side.
Depends where you stand on the spectrum. I think that's a fair point.
Yeah.
But there is an institutional... And it's not just institutional, it's a cultural bias towards certain progressive, as Andrew Marr himself said.
I don't think it's
a progressive...
It's partly who the BBC employs, where it's located. That's a lot of it. I often think they're biased without knowing they are. Now, in response to that little debate, a BBC spokesperson, couldn't be spokesman, could it, said, the claim the BBC took down a story after reviewing footage is completely wrong. We did not remove any story and we stand by our journalism. Our news stories and headlines about Sunday's aid distribution centre incident were updated throughout the day and always clearly attributed. This is totally normal practice on any fast-moving news story. So there you are. Now, before we end this segment, Elon Musk, he's an extraordinary figure.
He is.
He's an heroic figure in many ways. His space missions... were achieved in a fraction of the time, for a fraction of the price that NASA could do.
But I'm afraid he does behave like a spoiled child in many ways. If he doesn't get his way, if people don't agree with him, he throws his toys out of the pram and says, what he said was a disgusting abomination. Obviously it's coloured language, but I think at the same time he is intolerant of any kind of dissent or divergence of view.
I found that. In my relationship with him, it raises quite a big question. Is it valuable, or could it be valuable, for big, powerful figures from outside the political world to get involved in politics, or is it always going to end badly?
Look, I have not much time for Elon's views. I don't agree with almost anything that he says. But to defend him slightly, I do think that we are in danger in politics of getting too bland people because everyone feels like they have to talk and behave and walk in the same way. Not everyone should be good at everything. And sometimes you want disruptors to come in. I want disruptors in a different direction. But you need disruptors to come in, and they should be awkward fits. You know, just like the cow needs that grit in the stomach to actually digest the grass.
You're a biology expert.
You need
the oysters.
You need the grit in the system sometimes to get it working properly. And I think that was what his role was meant to be. It was always short term, and then he was out.
Agree.
I think actually the bigger problem that he has is he's shown his hand now, and a lot of the people who bought his products, particularly Tesla, are revolted by his reviews, revolted by what he's actually pushed forward, because that's not the values basis that he sold his cars on previously. And I suspect he's damaged his business.
Well, he's damaged his business, and he's not going back to the White House any time soon. I cannot see, with Donald Trump having given him such unique access to the inside, this being forgiven.
But I think Lloyd is right. I think it was always going to be a short-term stint.
Yeah, it's just a very bad way to end.
Yeah,
and
that's
Donald
the thing.
Trump's got relatively thin skin when it comes to personal attacks.
Well, he does forgive people, but this will take some time.